A widowed millionaire spends Father's Day completely alone in his luxurious mansion, anxiously waiting for his 3 children who never show up. Meanwhile, he discovers through social media that they are traveling the world, spending fortunes with his credit card without even sending a message. At the saddest moment of the day, the poor gardener's daughter, a 7-year-old girl, shyly appears with a handmade drawing showing her holding his hand, saying, "Happy Father's Day, you're like a second father to me." Deeply moved, he falls into tears. The next day, he makes a decision that changes everything forever. The Sunday morning sun flooded the dining room of Arthur Sterling's mansion with a generosity that bordered on irony. Beams of golden light danced across the solid mahogany table, polished to a point where it reflected the vaulted ceiling like a tranquil lake. In the center, an arrangement of white lilies, his late wife's favorite, perfumed the air, mingling with the robust aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the comforting scent of the pot roast browning slowly in the oven. Arthur, a man of 65 whose broad shoulders now stooped under an invisible weight, adjusted the silver cutlery next to the fine china plate for the 3rd time. There were 4 place settings, his and those of his 3 children, Richard, Beatrice, and Leo. It was Father's Day, and the anticipation made his heart beat a little faster, a mix of hope and an old fear he refused to name. He had prepared everything himself, giving the staff the day off so they could have an exclusively family moment, an intimate one, the kind that hadn't happened in so long. The roast recipe had been Helen's, his wife's, and cooking it was like bringing a fragment of her back, a sacred ritual of memory and love. He glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner of the room. 11:30. Lunch was set for noon. They must be on their way, he murmured to the silence of the house. A silence so vast and deep, it seemed to have its own physical presence. Arthur was a man who had turned a small initial capital into an empire, a self-made multi-millionaire whose fortune, built on bold stock market investments and a relentless business acumen, was legendary. But that morning, he wasn't thinking about the dollars in his portfolio or the euros in his overseas accounts, nor about the cash flow of his companies. He was only thinking of the sound of his children's laughter filling that void. He had given them everything, the best schools, the latest cars, luxury apartments, and unlimited access to his vast estate. He had done it out of love, so they would never want for anything. In return, he only asked for their presence, especially on days like this. Noon came and went. The clock's pendulum marked each minute with a solemn, almost funereal beat. The roast, now perfect, rested on the kitchen counter, releasing a steam that no longer seemed so appetizing. At 1 in the afternoon, Arthur's hope began to crumble like the edges of an old document. He picked up his phone, the screen cold against his sweaty palm. No messages, no missed calls. Perhaps they'd run into something, a monumental traffic jam on the I-95. He always found excuses for them, weaving a tapestry of justifications to cover the nakedness of their indifference. But with each passing minute, the threads of that tapestry grew thinner and more fragile. The sun began to shift, the golden light turning into the orange hue of late afternoon. The set table, once a symbol of hope, now looked like an altar of abandonment. The mansion's silence was no longer peaceful, it was accusatory. He sat in his place at the head of the table, his body heavy with an exhaustion that wasn't physical. With a trembling sigh, he opened a social media app on his phone, perhaps to distract himself. His thumb scrolled aimlessly down the screen until an image made him stop. The air seemed to be sucked from his lungs. The photo, posted by a friend of Richard's, was unmistakable. In it, his 3 children, Richard, Beatrice, and Leo, were smiling broadly, drinks in hand, on a yacht gliding through impossibly blue waters. The caption read, "Celebrating life in the Greek Isles." Unforgettable surprise. The post was time-stamped that very morning. They weren't stuck in traffic. They were on the other side of the world, toasting in a paradisiacal setting, without even a thought for the father who waited for them in a now dark and cold dining room. The phone screen seemed to burn his retinas. Beatrice's smile, Richard and Leo's arms raised in a carefree toast. The sparkling blue of the Aegean Sea in the background. Every detail was a stab to his chest. A low hum started in his ears, muffling the ticking of the clock. He dropped the device on the table as if it were a venomous creature, the dull thud of metal against wood echoing in the empty room. The trip, he calculated quickly, the yacht, the luxury hotels, all paid for with the money he gave them without a second thought. A continuous cash flow that he believed was an expression of his paternal love. He had always thought that his vast wealth, his assets spread across the globe, could buy happiness and unity for his family. What a fool he had been. He wasn't a father. He was a sponsor, a bottomless treasury to be plundered. The pain was so sharp, so physical, that he had to lean on the table to keep from falling. The smell of the roast, once a promise of comfort, now suffocated him, becoming the rancid odor of his own delusion. With a brusque movement, he stood and strode to the kitchen. He opened the oven door, and the wave of heat that hit him felt like a mockery. There it was, the perfect meal for a family that didn't exist. Without thinking, he grabbed the heavy roasting pan with his bare hands. The burn was instant and violent, but the physical pain was a welcome relief, a distraction for the agony in his soul. He dropped the pan in the sink with a crash, the porcelain splitting in two. The roast, the masterpiece of his hope, lay ruined. He turned on the cold tap and let the icy stream run over his reddened hands, his eyes fixed on the destruction he had created, a perfect reflection of what he felt inside. The mansion, with its valuable assets and impeccable decor, had never felt so oppressive. A gilded cage built with the profits of his business, but empty of meaning. He needed air. He walked out to the backyard, the afternoon sun already lower in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. The fresh air cleared some of the fog from his mind. There, amidst the rose bushes he and Helen had planted, he always found a remnant of peace. That's when he saw her, Leah, the 7-year-old daughter of his gardener, Miguel. The girl was sitting on the grass near a bed of daisies, drawing intently in a notebook propped on her knees. She wore a simple yellow dress, and her dark hair was tied in 2 braids. Over the years, a quiet, tender friendship had blossomed between the old millionaire and the little girl. He would tell her stories about the stars, and she would show him her drawings of fantastic creatures. She saw him not as the owner of a fortune, but as the kind gentleman with a sad smile in his eyes. Leah looked up and saw him. Her face lit up with a genuine smile, but it faded when she noticed the expression on Arthur's face. She stood up slowly, clutching the notebook to her chest. She approached him with hesitant steps, the caution of a child who senses an adult's pain. "Are you sad, Mr. Arthur?" she asked, her voice small and soft like the buzz of a bee. Arthur tried to force a smile, but his lips trembled. He just nodded, unable to speak. The simplicity of the question, the sincere concern in her dark eyes, broke the last of his composure. He felt his eyes burn. The girl looked at the ground for a moment, thinking. Then, with sudden determination, she opened her notebook, carefully tore out a page, and folded it. She took a few more steps until she was right in front of him and, stretching out her little arms, offered him the paper. "This is for you," she whispered, her small hand trembling slightly. "Maybe it will help." Arthur looked at the small, folded piece of paper in the girl's hand. His own hands, still throbbing from the burn, trembled slightly. He hesitated for a moment. The world of business and high-stakes transactions, of stocks and dividends, seeming ridiculous and distant in the face of such a pure gesture. With a care he didn't usually employ in his multi-million-dollar deals, he took the paper from Leah's hands, It was a simple sheet of notebook paper, with serrated edges where it had been torn out. He unfolded it slowly, his heart tight with an emotion he couldn't identify. It was a drawing, made with worn-down colored pencils. In it, two stick figures were holding hands under a smiling yellow sun. One figure was tall, with grey hair scribbled on top of its head. The other was small, with two dark braids and a yellow dress. Above them, in uneven, childish handwriting, was written, "For my friend Arthur." A wave of warmth, far more intense than the one from the oven, spread through his chest. He looked from the drawing to the girl's anxious face. Leah was biting her lower lip, her large dark eyes fixed on him, waiting for a reaction. In that moment, the opulence of the mansion, the net worth that placed him on the lists of the richest men, all of it faded to grey. The only wealth that mattered was on that piece of paper. In that expression of genuine affection, a single, hot, heavy tear escaped his control and rolled down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away with the back of his hand, embarrassed, but the emotion was too strong to be contained. The contrast between that simple gesture and the attitude of his own children was an unbridgeable chasm. They, who had received the best of his fortune, hadn't given him a second of their time. And this girl, who had nothing, offered him the entire universe contained in a drawing. "Thank you, Leah," he managed to say, his voice hoarse and choked. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received." The smile that broke across her face was like the sun rising after a long night. The tension in her small shoulders disappeared. "I made it just now. I saw you were alone and thought a drawing might make the day happier." He knelt, with a low groan from his aching joints. To be at her eye level, he looked deep into the girl's eyes, seeing a wisdom and empathy that seemed too big for her small frame. "You did, sweetie. You made my day much, much happier." Just then, Miguel, the gardener, came around the bend in the garden path, a quiet, hard-working man who always kept a respectful distance. He saw the scene, his boss kneeling, talking to his daughter, and paused, uncertain. "Leah, don't bother Mr. Arthur," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "She's not bothering me, Miguel," Arthur replied, rising slowly, still clutching the drawing as if it were a priceless treasure. "In fact, your daughter just saved my day." Miguel frowned, confused. He saw Arthur's red hands and his grief-stricken face. "Are you all right, sir? Did your children come for lunch?" The question, asked in innocence, was like a punch to the gut. Arthur swallowed hard, the lump in his throat tightening. He couldn't lie, not to this honest man, not after his daughter's gift. "No, Miguel, they had other plans." The bitterness in his voice was undeniable. Miguel and Leah exchanged a quick, understanding glance. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but filled with a tacit compassion. Leah, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, timidly took Arthur's hand. Her small fingers closed around one of his, a small touch, but it anchored him to reality, pulling him out of the whirlpool of his loneliness. That simple human contact was more valuable than all the gold held in his vaults. He looked down at the small hand holding his, and then at the paper in his other hand. The image of his children toasting on the yacht began to fade from his mind, replaced by the image of two stick figures holding hands under a happy sun. And he knew, with a certainty that was both painful and liberating, that something inside him had changed forever. The days following that fateful Father's Day were a blur of silence and reflection for Arthur. He cancelled his meetings, ignored calls from his investment managers, and spent hours on end in his study, not to analyze the stock market or plan new ventures, but to look at Leah's drawing, which he had framed and placed on his desk, where a photo of his smiling children at a graduation used to be. The drawing was a constant, painful reminder of the disconnect he had allowed to grow in his own family. Generosity, which he had always seen as a virtue, now seemed like a weakness, a shortcut he had used to buy a love that should have been unconditional. He had given them so much capital, so many advantages, that they had never needed to develop the most important currency of all, character. And in the process, he had become a stranger to them, a financial entity, not a father. The lack of communication from Richard, Beatrice, and Leo was deafening. No apology, no explanation. It was as if Father's Day had simply not existed for them. Arthur, for the first time in decades, felt completely powerless. He, who could move markets with a single decision, a feared and respected billionaire, couldn't even get a response from his own children. The loneliness, once a ghost haunting the corners of his mansion, now sat beside him, a constant, cold companion. He tried calling Richard, the eldest, the heir apparent to his empire. The call went to voicemail after the first ring. He tried Beatrice, his princess, to whom he had never denied anything. Her phone was off. Leo, the youngest, the bohemian artist whose quest for inspiration he generously funded, also didn't answer. It was a wall of silence, built brick by brick with their indifference. Meanwhile, his friendship with Leah deepened. Every afternoon when Miguel finished his work, the girl would run to the veranda where Arthur usually read the paper. She would sit on a step near him, sometimes in silence, just drawing in her notebook, other times chattering about her school, her friends, or the ladybug she found on a rose leaf. Her presence was a balm to Arthur's wounded soul. He found himself smiling at her stories, feeling a genuine warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. He started helping her with her homework, explaining fractions with slices of cake and teaching her about the constellations using an app on his tablet. He realized that in these moments, he wasn't thinking about his liabilities or his return on investment. He was just Arthur, an old friend of a 7-year-old girl, and that was more gratifying than any profit he had ever made. One afternoon, as they were reviewing multiplication tables, Leah stopped suddenly and looked at him seriously. "Mr. Arthur, why do your children never come to visit you?" she asked, with the brutal honesty only children possess. The question caught him off guard. He lowered the book, the smile vanishing from his face. How could he explain the complexity of ingratitude to a child? How could he admit his own failure as a father? They're very busy, Leah, he lied, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. Leah wrinkled her nose, clearly unconvinced. "But nobody is too busy to see their daddy. My mom works 2 jobs, but she always picks me up from school and tucks me in at night. She says I'm her treasure." The word treasure hit Arthur with the force of a punch. He used that word to describe his assets, his most valuable investments, but here, from the mouth of a child, the word regained its true meaning. He looked out at the manicured garden, at the immense and empty house, and felt the weight of his estate as never before. He had everything money could buy, but he had failed to build the one thing that truly mattered. He had lost his real treasure. The realization left him breathless, a cold void opening in his chest. He needed to do something, needed to try to fix what was broken, but a paralyzing fear held him back. The fear that perhaps it was already too late. The week dragged on, each day a monotonous replica of the last. Arthur moved through the mansion like a ghost, the silence amplifying the echo of his thoughts. Leah's phrase, "Nobody is too busy to see their daddy," reverberated in his mind, stripping away all the excuses he had built for himself over the years. The truth was raw and undeniable. He was not a priority in his children's lives. He was a convenience, a financial safety net. This understanding didn't come with anger, but with a deep, hollow sadness, as if a vital part of him had been scooped out. He began to revisit the past in his mind, searching for the exact point where things started to go wrong. He remembered birthdays missed for business trips, school plays he didn't attend because he was closing an important deal that would increase his capital. He had always justified his absences with the idea that he was building a secure future for them, a solid inheritance. Now, he saw the bitter irony. In the pursuit of giving them a financial future, he had neglected their emotional present. The only sparks of light in his dark days were the afternoons with Leah. The girl, with her innocence and uncomplicated joy, managed to pierce the fog of his melancholy. One day she came running, breathless with excitement, holding a shoebox. "Look, Mr. Arthur, I found a baby bird. I think he hurt his wing." Inside the box, nestled in dry leaves, was a small, trembling sparrow. Arthur, the man who dealt in dollars and euros and thought in terms of profit and loss, found himself on his knees on the grass, examining the tiny wing with a gentleness that surprised even himself. Together, he and Leah made a small splint from a popsicle stick and gauze and set up a makeshift shelter for the bird. The task, so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of his life, felt immensely important. It was an act of care. A small repair in a world that seemed hopelessly broken. Meanwhile, his children's trip continued to unfold on their social media feeds. Photos of expensive dinners in Paris, shopping sprees in Milan, yacht parties in Ibiza. Each image was a reminder of the chasm between their world and his. He saw the comments from their friends, praising their amazing life and free spirit, and wondered if anyone, at any point, questioned the source of all that extravagance. He noticed that the supplementary credit cards, which he had provided for emergencies, were being used with alarming frequency. Purchases of thousands of dollars at designer brands, hotel bills that would make most people flinch. He had always paid the statements without question, considering it part of the cost of keeping his children happy. But now, each expense notification felt like an insult, proof that his value to them was purely transactional. One night, unable to sleep, he went down to the wine cellar, a climate-controlled space that housed rare and expensive wines, many of them investments worth a small fortune. He opened a bottle of a label he had been saving for a special occasion, Beatrice's engagement, perhaps, or Richard's first major success. The occasion never came. He poured a glass and sat in the leather armchair in his study, Leah's drawing illuminated by the soft lamplight. He took a sip of the wine, the liquid rich and complex, but felt no pleasure, only emptiness. He thought of Miguel, the gardener, who arrived every day before dawn on his worn-out bicycle, worked under the sun for a modest wage, and at the end of the day went home to find the treasure of his life. Who was the truly wealthy man? Him, with his investment funds and real estate assets, or Miguel, with his daughter's unconditional love? The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Arthur wasn't sure of the answer. He felt an overwhelming urge to confront his children, to demand an explanation, to make them understand the pain they were causing. He picked up his phone, his finger hovering over Richard's name. But what would he say? How would he start a conversation he had been putting off for years? The fear of rejection, of having his worst suspicions confirmed, paralyzed him. He turned off the screen and took another sip of wine. The bitter taste of loneliness mingling with the expensive drink. The second week since Father's Day arrived, and with it, a new layer of silence settled over the mansion. Arthur had fallen into a melancholic routine, marked by solitary meals and long hours staring out the window, lost in memories of a time when the house was filled with the sound of children's laughter. The only constant that kept him anchored was Leah. Their friendship had become the axis of his days. He waited for her eagerly every afternoon, preparing a snack for her, fresh orange juice and cookies the cook made especially. They cared for the injured sparrow, whom Leah had named Pip, and celebrated every small progress, every short, clumsy flight he attempted inside the box. That small life, dependent on their care, gave Arthur a sense of purpose that his billion-dollar businesses no longer provided. One afternoon, the weather turned heavy. Grey clouds rolled over the town, and a light rain began to fall, drumming softly on the window panes. Leah arrived with damp braids and cheeks flushed from the cold, bringing the smell of wet earth with her. They sat in the library, An imposing room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, something that had always fascinated the girl. As the rain intensified outside, turning into a storm, Leah took out her notebook and began to draw. Arthur watched her in silence, marveling at her ability to concentrate, the tip of her tongue peeking out from the corner of her mouth as she traced careful lines on the paper. After a long while, she looked up, a proud smile on her face. "I'm done," she announced. She turned the notebook towards him. It was a much more detailed drawing than the first. 2 figures, again, one tall, with white hair, which he recognized as himself. The other, small, in a yellow dress. But this time, they weren't just holding hands. In the drawing, the large figure had a protective arm around the small one's shoulders, and both were looking up at a star-filled sky. There was a house in the background, which looked very much like Arthur's mansion, and a small sparrow flying above them. The simplicity and depth of the image hit him with unexpected force. It was a representation of everything he felt he had lost, and at the same time, everything he was finding in this unlikely friendship. "It's us, taking care of Pip and looking at the stars," she explained, pointing to each detail with her little finger. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "It's beautiful, Leah. Very, very beautiful." Then she handed him the open notebook, along with a pencil. "Now it's your turn. You have to draw your family." The innocent request was like a punch to the gut. Draw his family. The image that came to mind was of his 3 children on the yacht, smiling for a camera, miles away, in every sense of the word. He felt his face flush, a mixture of shame and sorrow. I'm not very good at drawing, sweetie," he stammered, a flimsy excuse. Leah tilted her head, her eyes large and serious. "It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be real. Real." The word echoed in his mind. What was the truth of his family? An illusion maintained with money and convenience. He picked up the pencil, his hand as heavy as lead. He stared at the blank page, which seemed a reflection of his own heart. He couldn't draw Richard, Beatrice, and Leo. The image of them was blurred by the pain of their absence. Instead, without thinking, his hand began to move, tracing hesitant lines. He drew a tall figure and a small one, holding hands, just like in the first drawing she had given him. He drew a man with a rake, smiling beside them Miguel, and finally he drew a woman with her hair pulled back, with a tired but loving smile, next to Leah, her mother, whom he only knew by sight. He looked at what he had drawn. It wasn't his biological family, but it was an image of connection, of care. It was a real family. The revelation stunned him, the pencil falling from his trembling fingers. The rain beat against the library windows, creating a curtain of water that isolated the room from the rest of the world. Inside, the only sounds were Arthur's breathing and the soft ticking of a desk clock. He kept staring at the drawing he had made. Him, Leah, Miguel, and her mother. A family. A family that wasn't his, but that represented a longing so deep it ached. He felt like an imposter, a thief of affection, projecting his desires onto people he barely knew. Leah, sensing the storm of emotions on his face, came closer and placed her small hand on his, which still rested on the table. "It's nice," she said softly. "It's your heart, family." Her words, so simple and so profound, broke the dam he had built around himself. He leaned forward, resting his head in his hands, and the sobs came, dry and painful, shaking his shoulders. It was years of loneliness, of disappointment, and of self-deception coming to the surface. He cried for the wife he had lost, for the children he never truly had, and for the empty life he had built amidst so much wealth. Leah said nothing. She just stood beside him, her small hand still on his, a silent, steady presence in the midst of his emotional shipwreck. After what felt like an eternity, the sobs subsided, leaving him exhausted and strangely light. He raised his head and looked at the girl, his eyes red and his face wet. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to—" "It's okay to cry," she interrupted him with an adult seriousness. "Mommy says crying washes your soul." He managed a weak smile. In that moment, he made a decision. No more hiding, no more waiting. He needed answers. He needed to face the truth, however painful it might be. His friendship with Leah had given him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He stood up, feeling his bones crack. He went to his desk, picked up his phone, and with a cold determination dialed the number of the lawyer who managed much of his estate, a man named Mr. Harrison. "Harrison," Arthur said, without preamble, when the lawyer answered. "I need you to do a rundown. I want to know exactly every cent my children have spent in the last 6 months. Hotels, flights, purchases, everything. And I want the report on my desk tomorrow morning." There was a surprised silence on the other end of the line. "Mr. Sterling, is there a problem?" the lawyer asked cautiously. "I don't know yet," Arthur replied, "but I'm about to find out." The next morning, a thick, sealed envelope was on his desk. With steady hands, he opened it. It was pages and pages of credit card statements and bank reports. What he saw took his breath away. The spending wasn't just extravagant, it was astronomical. Thousands of dollars on a single night at a club, tens of thousands on watches and jewelry, rentals of sports cars, presidential suites. It was a trail of unchecked hedonism, financed by his hard work. But it wasn't the amount that shocked him most. It was a specific transaction made by Richard, his eldest son, a substantial payment to a luxury rehabilitation clinic in Switzerland. And the date was the day before Father's Day. An icy chill ran down his spine. Richard wasn't just traveling, he was dealing with something serious, something he had completely hidden from his father and the others. Were they covering for their brother? Was the trip not a celebration but an escape? Their indifference, which he had interpreted as ingratitude, suddenly took on a much darker and more complex shape. He wasn't just dealing with spoiled children. There was a secret, a crisis they were facing alone, deliberately excluding him. The pain of rejection gave way to a cold sense of dread. What else did he not know about the lives he thought he had built? The report in his hands felt like it weighed a ton. Every number, every establishment name told a story he was not a part of. The discovery about Richard's rehab clinic changed everything. The ingratitude that had tormented him now transformed into a much more complex and distressing puzzle. Why hadn't Richard told him? Why were Beatrice and Leo covering for him with a facade of a luxury trip? The money, which he had always seen as the root of the problem, now seemed to be just a symptom of a much deeper illness in his family. The lack of communication, the absence of trust. They didn't see him as a father they could turn to in a time of crisis, but as a problem to be circumvented, a resource to be tapped to secretly solve their own messes. This realization was, in some ways, more painful than simple neglect. Arthur spent the rest of the day locked in his study, the report spread across the mahogany desk. He tried calling Richard again, this time with a desperate urgency. The phone rang and rang, finally going to voicemail. The recorded message, in his son's carefree voice, was a mockery of his anguish. He left a message, trying to keep his voice calm, asking Richard to call him urgently, saying he wasn't angry, just worried. Next, he called Beatrice. She answered on the third ring, the sound of loud music and conversations in the background. "Dad, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice slightly slurred. "Beatrice, where are you? And where is your brother?" "Richard." He got straight to the point. There was a pause on the other end of the line. He could almost hear the gears in her mind turning, searching for a plausible lie. "We're in Spain, Dad. Richard is here with us." "Why? Everything's fine." The blatant lie hit him like a slap. "No, Beatrice, nothing is fine. I know about Switzerland. I know about the clinic." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The music in the background seemed to stop. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, the confidence in her voice crumbling. "Stop lying to me," he exploded, the frustration and pain finally breaking through his composure. "I am your father. Why would you hide this from me? Why are you spending a fortune to pretend everything is okay when it clearly isn't? You wouldn't understand," she retorted, her voice now filled with a defensive anger. "You always solve everything with money. We thought we could handle this on our own. Without your lectures on responsibility and the family estate." The call ended abruptly. Arthur stared at the phone, her words echoing in his ears. "You wouldn't understand." Maybe she was right. Maybe, in his eagerness to provide, he had forgotten how to listen. Maybe his presence had become so associated with financial transactions that they no longer knew how to approach him in any other way. The anger gave way to an overwhelming wave of guilt. He had created this dynamic. He was part of the problem. The afternoon arrived, and with it, Leah. The girl found him sitting on the veranda, his gaze lost on the horizon. She sensed the shift in his energy, the storm brewing inside him. Without a word, she sat beside him and took his hand. Her touch was a reminder of a simple, genuine connection, free from the complexities and resentments that poisoned his relationship with his own children. "Pip flew today," she said, her voice soft. "He went all the way to the highest branch of the magnolia tree." Arthur looked at her, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "He's ready to move on." "I think so," Leah said. "Sometimes you need help to get strong again, but then you have to learn to fly on your own." The wisdom in that simple sentence struck him deeply. His children were trying to fly on their own, but in the wrong way. They were using his savings, his assets, as a pair of prosthetic wings instead of developing their own. And he, afraid they would fall, kept providing those artificial wings, preventing them from discovering their own strength. He looked at Leah's small hand holding his, and then at the vastness of his garden. He had to change. He had to stop being just the financier and start being truly a father. But how, if they didn't want him around? How could he fix a bridge they had burned themselves? The revelation of Richard's secret struggle and the orchestrated lie by his children left Arthur in a state of shock. He felt like a sailor who, after years of believing he knew the sea, discovers treacherous currents and sea monsters hidden just below the surface. The initial anger gave way to a profound sense of failure. He had built a business empire based on risk analysis and predictability, yet his own family was an unknown and volatile territory. Beatrice's words, "You always solve everything with money," hammered in his head. He re-examined his actions, his solutions to his children's problems over the years. The new car after a fender bender, the trip to Europe to heal a broken heart, the investment in another of Leo's doomed business ventures. They were all checks, wire transfers, a stream of cash that soothed the guilt of his emotional absence. He wasn't solving their problems, he was just paying for them to disappear from his sight. Determined to break this pattern, he made a drastic decision. He called Mr. Harrison again. "Harrison, I want you to contact the credit card company. Cancel all supplementary cards in my children's names immediately." The pause on the other end of the line was even longer this time. "Mr. Sterling, are you sure? This could cause significant complications for them, especially being overseas." "I'm absolutely sure," Arthur said, his voice as firm as steel. "Emergencies, from now on, will be handled directly by me. They have my number." He hung up before the lawyer could argue. It was the first real no he had said to his children in over a decade. The feeling was terrifying and at the same time liberating. It was like cutting a rope that tied him to a runaway balloon. The reaction wasn't long in coming. Less than an hour later, his phone rang. It was Leo. Dad, what did you do? My card was declined. I was trying to pay the hotel bill. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? His voice was a mixture of panic and indignation. Yes, Leo, I do, Arthur replied calmly. As of today, the well has run dry. If you have a problem, if you need help, you talk to me, like a son talks to a father. No more anonymous transactions. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. We're in the middle of a trip. Leo protested. The trip is over. It's time to come home. All of you. We have a lot to talk about. You don't control us, Leo shouted, the immaturity in his voice more evident than ever. Actually, as long as I pay the bills, I do. And the bills, my son, have just been closed. The call dropped. Arthur took a deep breath, his heart pounding. The war had been declared. That afternoon, when Leah arrived, she found him in the garden, pruning the rose bushes with a pair of shears, a job he usually left to Miguel. There was a different energy about him, a determination the girl noticed. "Are you mad?" she asked, sitting on the grass. "No, sweetie, I'm not mad," he said, snipping off a dead branch with a snap. "I'm trying to fix my garden." Leah looked at the rose bushes, some lush and full of flowers, others weak and withered. My grandpa used to say that sometimes you have to cut off the sick branches to make the plant strong again. It hurts the plant, but then it grows the most beautiful flowers." Arthur stopped what he was doing and looked at her, a genuine smile forming on his face for the first time in days. That was exactly what he was doing, a painful, necessary pruning, in the hope that something stronger and more beautiful could flourish. He knew his children would hate him for it. Their resistance would be fierce, but for the first time he was willing to risk their money for a chance, perhaps to save their souls, and his own. He no longer wanted to be an ATM, he wanted to be a father. The cost of that transformation, he was beginning to realize, could be his entire fortune, but the profit could be immeasurable. The days following the cancellation of the credit cards were filled with a tense silence, the calm before the storm. Arthur knew his children were regrouping, planning their next move. The absence of angry calls was more unsettling than Leo's shouting. It meant they were treating the situation not as a family drama, but as a logistical problem, a cash flow issue to be solved. This realization strengthened his resolve. He wasn't fighting against hurt children. He was in a hostile negotiation with business partners who felt betrayed. The metaphor was sad, but accurate. He spent his mornings reviewing his investments, not with the goal of increasing his wealth, but of understanding it, of seeing clearly the extent of the gilded cage he had built for himself and for them. The stocks, the treasury bonds, the crypto funds. It all seemed cold and lifeless, mere numbers on a screen. His real wealth was in the afternoons he spent with Leah. They had released Pip a few days earlier. They watched together as the sparrow, its wing now healed, circled the magnolia tree before disappearing into the blue sky. Leah's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "He's free now," she said. "He's going to build his own nest." Arthur felt a pang in his heart, the analogy to his own situation almost too painful to bear. He wanted his children to build their own nests, but they seemed determined to remain in the golden one he had built, even if it suffocated them. One day, while helping Leah with a science project on the water cycle, she asked, "Mr. Arthur, what's an inheritance?" The question caught him off guard. He tried to explain in simple terms, talking about leaving things for the people we love after we're gone. "Like your businesses and your money?" she asked. "Yes, like that," he confirmed. Leah thought for a moment, her forehead wrinkled. "But it's not just that, right? My mum says her grandma left her the recipe for apple pie and the way she tells stories. Is that an inheritance too?" The girl's words struck him like lightning. What was he leaving his children besides a fortune in dollars? What life recipes? What values, what legacy of character had he passed down? The answer was a frightening void. He had given them the means to live, but not the reasons why. This epiphany led him to make another decision, perhaps the most significant of all. That night, he called Mr. Harrison again. "Harrison, I want you to prepare the papers to change my will." The lawyer's voice was tense. "Mr. Sterling, I advise you not to make any rash decisions. Inheritance battles can be devastating for a family." "My family is already devastated, Harrison. Maybe this is the only way to save it," Arthur said. "I'm not disinheriting them completely. They'll have a trust. Enough to get back on their feet, to start over. But the main control, the bulk of my estate, will be redirected." "To whom, if I may ask?" the lawyer inquired. "To a new foundation. A foundation that will fund the education of underprivileged children, that will give other children the opportunity my own children have squandered." It was a radical decision, an earthquake in his financial world. He knew it would be seen as a declaration of war. His children, who already saw him as a bank, would now see him as an enemy. The legal battle that would follow would be brutal and public. He would be painted as a senile old man, a cruel father. But as he made this decision, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He was no longer trying to buy their love. He was investing in a different future, a future based on merit and opportunity, not on entitlement. He was leaving a real inheritance, not just for Leah, but for thousands of children like her. And for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing the right thing, no matter the cost. The news of the change to the will traveled faster than Arthur had imagined. A leak at the bank, an indiscretion from a junior employee, and the earthquake he had started in his study echoed across the Atlantic. The response was immediate and furious. This time, it wasn't Leo or Beatrice. It was Richard. He called from an unknown number, his voice cold and sharp, devoid of any emotion except a chilling rage. "What kind of game are you playing?" he began, without so much as a hello. "Changing the will, starting a foundation. Have you finally lost your mind?" Arthur leaned back in his chair, his heart heavy but his spine straight. "It's not a game, Richard. It's my decision. It's my money, my legacy." "We are your legacy. Your children," Richard retorted. "A legacy that seems more interested in my net worth than in me," Arthur replied, sadness tinging his voice. "We're coming back, and we're going to sort this out. Get your lawyers ready." The call ended. There were no questions about his health, no attempt at reconciliation, just a threat. The court battle Mr. Harrison had predicted was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. The following days were a blur of preparations. Meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, all trying to dissuade him, warning him about the public scandal, about how society would judge him. "They're going to say you're being manipulated," Harrison said, genuine concern on his face. "They'll use the girl, the gardener's daughter, against you. They'll paint her as an opportunist, her family as grifters." Arthur felt a chill. The idea that they could drag Leah and her family through this filth was unbearable. He thought about backing down, about giving in, just to protect her. But then he remembered the drawing, the touch of her small hand, the purity of her affection. To retreat now would be to betray not only himself, but also what she represented, the truth that love has no price. "Let them say it," he replied to Harrison, his voice firmer than he felt. "The truth is my best defense." They arrived on a rainy afternoon at the end of the third week. 3 expensive black cars slid through the gates of the mansion. Richard, Beatrice, and Leo emerged, dressed in designer clothes but with tense, pale faces. They looked like strangers in their own home. Arthur waited for them in the living room, standing near the fireplace, the portrait of his late wife hanging above him like a silent guardian angel. The meeting was brutal. There were no hugs, no questions about how he was. It was a coordinated attack. Richard, the strategist, spoke of Arthur's mental health, his vulnerability after their mother's death, his inappropriate fixation on a child. Beatrice, the emotional one, cried crocodile tears, talking about how he was destroying the family, about Mommy's legacy of love that he was desecrating. Leo, the artist, accused him of being a materialistic tyrant who had always used money to control everyone and was now using it to punish them. Arthur listened to it all in silence, each word a knife twist. They took their own failings, their own insecurities, and projected them onto him with surgical cruelty. When they had finally finished, the silence in the room was heavy and oppressive. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice calm. He looked at each of them, seeing not the children he loved, but three scared, spoiled adults, terrified at the prospect of losing the source of their existence. "I offered you my time, my concern, my love. I offered you a father. You refused. All you wanted was my money. Now that there's a chance of losing it, you finally come back, not to see me, but to secure your inheritance." He paused, his heart aching with every word. "The hearing is set. You can bring your best lawyers, but know this. You can try to take my money. You can try to question my sanity, but you will never again take my peace. I've found it in a place you never thought to look." Before they could respond, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving them alone amidst the wealth they so coveted, poorer than they had ever been. The court battle began, and it was as ugly as Arthur had predicted. His children's lawyers filed a petition to have him declared mentally incompetent, requesting a conservatorship over his assets. The arguments were cruel and calculated, painting a portrait of a lonely, elderly man thus easily manipulated by a family of opportunistic employees. Leah's and Miguel's names were dragged through the mud, cited in legal documents as proof of the undue influence over Arthur. The news spread like wildfire, first in business circles, then in the gossip columns. "Billionaire disinherits children for poor girl," screamed the headlines. Arthur became the talk of the town, judged at dinner parties and country clubs. Old friends distanced themselves, and the isolation he felt before was now reinforced by walls of scandal and speculation. He tried to protect Miguel and his family, offering them money to move away, to escape the circus. But Miguel, a man of unshakable dignity, refused. "We've done nothing wrong, Mr. Arthur," he said, his eyes steady. "To run would be to admit a guilt we don't have. We stand with you." The pressure was immense. His own lawyers advised him to seek a settlement, to concede a larger portion of the fortune to avoid the public humiliation of a trial. "They will expose everything, Arthur, every mistake, every absence. They will destroy you on the stand," warned Mr. Harrison. Fear gnawed at him. The fear of having his life scrutinized, his failures as a father displayed for the world, the fear, above all, that in the end, maybe they were right, maybe he really was crazy. Trading the love of his children for a fantasy, doubt was a slow poison seeping into his resolve. His children, sensing his hesitation, launched their final blow. They sent a settlement offer through their lawyers. They would drop the conservatorship case if he restored the original will and created an unconditional and irrevocable trust for each of them. It was an ultimatum. The appearance of a united family in exchange for his total and unconditional financial surrender. The night before the deadline to respond to the offer, Arthur couldn't sleep. He wandered the silent house, every luxury object seeming like an accusation. He was in the library, looking at Helen's portrait, when he heard a soft sound at the door. It was Leah, in her teddy bear pajamas, holding her sketchbook. "I can't sleep," she whispered. "Mommy and Daddy are talking in low voices, and they sound sad." He invited her in, and she curled up in an armchair, her little feet barely reaching the edge. "Is it my fault?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. "The bad things they're saying about you and my family. Is it because I gave you the drawing?" The question, so innocent and so direct, broke Arthur's heart. He knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "No, sweetie, never. Don't ever think that. You've done nothing but bring me joy. The fault isn't yours, it's mine." "But why?" she insisted, her eyes large and moist. "Why are they so angry?" He took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Because sometimes people forget what's really important. They get lost, and they think things like money and possessions are more valuable than love and kindness." He looked into her eyes, and in that moment, the most devastating and liberating truth of all came to light, not as an external revelation, but as a confession whispered in the silence of the night. "You know, Leah," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "your daddy is very lucky, and your mommy too, because they have you." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I never had a real father. Mine only cared about business, and I don't think I knew how to be a father to my own children." He stopped, but Leah kept looking at him, waiting. And then she said the words that would change everything. "But you don't have a daddy?" she asked, confused. "I don't. He left when I was a baby. That's why on Father's Day, I made that drawing for you, because you take care of me. You're like the daddy I wish I had." Arthur's world stopped. Her confession, so pure and so painful, rearranged his entire universe. It wasn't about him being a substitute father. It was about a fatherless child who had chosen him, a child who saw in him the care and presence she had never had. And he, blinded by his own pain, hadn't realized the depth of the gift she had given him. It wasn't just a drawing, it was acceptance, the unconditional love he had been searching for his entire life. In that instant, all doubt dissolved. The decision became crystal clear. He wasn't choosing between his children and Leah. He was choosing between a comfortable lie and a painful truth. He was choosing to honor the true meaning of fatherly love, offered to him in its most humble and sincere form. He hugged the little girl, feeling her small arms around his neck, and he knew what he had to do. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next morning, Arthur woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Leah's confession the night before had not only solidified his decision, but had also healed an old wound within him, the wound of a boy who had also grown up without a father's affection. He understood that his journey wasn't about punishing his children, but about breaking a cycle of emotional abandonment that spanned generations. The first call he made wasn't to his lawyer. It was to Miguel. He invited him and his wife, Anna, for a talk in his study. They arrived apprehensive, their faces etched with worry. Arthur was direct and honest. He told them about his final decision to reject the settlement and proceed with the change to his will, and then he made them a proposal that left them speechless. "I can't replace the father Leah lost," he said, his voice firm but full of emotion, "but I would be honored to help you raise her, to give her every opportunity she deserves. I would like to legally adopt her as my daughter. Not to take anyone's place, but to add to her life, to be a constant presence of love and support." Miguel and Anna looked at each other, tears in their eyes. They were simple people, but they possessed a deep wisdom. They saw the sincerity in Arthur's eyes, the transformation of a broken man into someone who had found a new purpose. After a long conversation, filled with tears and brutal honesty, they accepted, not for money, but because they saw that Arthur genuinely loved Leah and that Leah loved him back. The adoption wasn't a transaction, but the formalization of a bond that already existed. With this new strength, Arthur went into battle. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was frigid. Richard, Beatrice, and Leo sat on the other side, their faces impassive. Their lawyers began the assault, presenting Arthur as an unstable old man. But when it was Arthur's turn to speak, He dismissed his lawyers and addressed the judge directly. He didn't talk about finances, about assets or liabilities. He talked about loneliness, about the mistake of thinking wealth could replace presence. He admitted his failures as a father, his absence, his attempt to compensate with money. "I failed my children," he said, looking directly at them. "I gave them everything except what they needed most, a father. And for that, I asked their forgiveness." Then he spoke of Leah. He showed the court the first drawing, the small sheet of notebook paper now worn from being handled so much. "This piece of paper," he said, his voice choking, "is worth more to me than my entire fortune. Because it wasn't given expecting anything in return. It was a gift of pure affection from a child who saw a sad old man and wanted to make him smile." He told the judge about Leah's confession, about her being fatherless. "My children have a father, a flawed father, a distant father, but a father who has always loved them in his own misguided way. And now, this father is offering them the greatest gift he can give: freedom, the freedom of their own wings. Not the golden wings I gave them that kept them from flying," he concluded, looking at the judge. "Your Honor, I am not disinheriting my children. I am giving them the hardest but most valuable inheritance, the chance to build their own lives, and I am using the rest of my estate to ensure that other children, like Leah, have the chance at a future not dictated by the circumstances of their birth." A profound silence filled the courtroom. The narrative he had built was not that of a senile old man, but of a man on a journey of redemption. The judge, an experienced man, saw beyond the inheritance dispute. He saw a complex and painful family drama. In the end, the decision was in his favor. The conservatorship petition was denied, and his mental competence affirmed. The legal war was over. Arthur had won, but the victory had a bittersweet taste. As he left the courthouse, he passed his children. Their gazes were no longer angry, but filled with a stunned emptiness. The bridge between them had been severed, perhaps forever. It was a painful cost, the sacrifice of his biological family. But as he got into the car, where Miguel, Anna, and Leah were waiting, he knew he was not alone. He was going home, to his new family, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by love, and by a simple drawing on a sheet of notebook paper. Exactly 4 weeks after the loneliest Sunday of his life, the morning sun flooded the same dining room, but the light no longer seemed ironic. It felt complicit. The vast mansion, once a cathedral of silence, now pulsed with a new and vibrant energy. The sound echoing through the halls was not the funereal ticking of the grandfather clock, but the infectious laughter of a 7-year-old girl chasing a puppy Arthur had adopted for her. The mahogany table, where 4 empty places had witnessed a father's abandonment, was now full. Arthur sat at the head, no longer a lonely king in his castle, but the happy patriarch of a newly formed family. Beside him, Leah chattered about her day at school. Across from them, Miguel and Leah's mother, Anna, smiled, their initial apprehension replaced by a genuine comfort. They were no longer just employees. They were family, partners in the wonderful, chaotic task of raising an extraordinary girl. The lunch was simple, roasted chicken and potatoes, but it tasted richer than any banquet Arthur had ever hosted. He looked at Leah's illuminated face and saw the reflection of his own salvation. The peace he had found didn't come from the victory in court or the reassertion of control over his fortune. It came from the understanding that true wealth wasn't stored in banks or invested in the stock market. It was right there. At that table, in the exchange of glances, the easy smiles, the feeling of Leah's small hand that, from time to time, reached for his under the tablecloth. He finally understood what a real investment was, investing time, attention, and love in another human being. The return was immeasurable, paid in daily dividends of joy and purpose. His biological children never contacted him again. The break was total and silent. There was a phantom pain, the memory of a love that could have been, but there was no bitterness. He had set them free, and in the process had freed himself from the desperate need for their approval. He hoped, with a serene sincerity, that they would find their own way, that they would learn to build something for themselves. The inheritance they were left with was the hardest, but the only one that could save them, the opportunity to start from scratch. For Leah, the girl who drew a father holding her hand, life had become a fulfilled promise. She discovered that a family didn't need to be conventional to be complete, and that the best gifts, indeed, cost only paper and pencil, but were worth more than all the gold in the world. Miguel and Anna, in turn, learned that kindness and dignity are universal currencies, recognized and valued regardless of social class. They hadn't lost a daughter. They had gained a grandfather for her, a friend for themselves, and the security of knowing Leah's future would be bright. The Arthur Sterling Foundation was already in operation, transforming the vast fortune that once funded emptiness into scholarships and opportunities for countless other children. Arthur's legacy would no longer be measured in dollars, but in the potential he would help to blossom. In his study, in the most prominent spot, was the framed drawing, not the second, more elaborate one, but the first "we" of the two stick figures under a smiling sun. That piece of paper had become his certificate of love, the most authentic and valuable document he possessed, proof that from the saddest Father's Day, the truest family can indeed be born. He, the millionaire who had been trapped in relationships based on money, finally understood that the greatest fortune is to be loved for who you are, not for what you have.